Hello everyone, my name is Rajan Bhandari and this is my first YouTube project where I will be discussing about the summary of a famous economics book. As we can all see in the newspapers and the internet that the value of currencies of different countries varies every day. We are also quite familiar with inflation in the market and many other things like people getting richer and poorer. Well, all these things are about economics. Generally, economics is blanketed by numbers and graphs, which is quite tedious for non-economists to comprehend. There are many of us who find numbers and figures quite lousy, but are interested to know about these economic issues. I guess there is a way for that. An American economist named Charles Wheelan has tried to explain economics without formulas and graphs in his book Naked Economics. Charles Wheelan is basically a professor, journalist, speaker, and most importantly, he is the author of many other famous books like Naked Statistics and Naked Money. In this book, he explains almost all the basic foundations of how an individual or a country works. The writer named the book Naked Economics as he tries to cover all the basic aspects of economics without the use of formulas and graphs. So, let's start with overall framework of the book. The book has 13 chapters and it is not quite bulky like the general economic textbook. I will be covering almost all the important chapters of this book. The book in its first chapter clearly explains how an individual is attracted to various aspects of the market in his or her life, like the role of incentives that plays in individuals' decision making and work efficiency. For example, a person is quite motivated to do a job if he or she is paid higher, or a child agreeing to do his homework if the child is promised with sneakers. As we can see very few rich people and many poor people around the world. What might be the reason for that? Well, it is affected by the background of any person or the society where the individual resides, and most importantly, the government. The book says that people who are more skilled and productive tend to be quite wealthy compared to the ones without good skills. Like Bill Gates was more productive than the ordinary American citizens, or an engineer earns more than a normal factory worker. The book also provides a clear insight into the role of government that plays a major role in controlling the economics of any country. The government has total control in the production and distribution of goods or services along with the flow of money, which is quite important. Generally, a market runs on its own that needs some externalities to run smoothly. So the government takes the necessary actions whenever the market cannot run on its own. He explains why taxation, subsidy and human capital impacts in the economic growth of any country. The power of organized interest has been clearly depicted in the book. We can get to know why the American farmers get government subsidies while their counterparts in China and India are struggling to get that support. The book then discusses about gross domestic product or GDP, as most of us evaluate a country's wealthiness based on its GDP. But that is not wrong, but it's partially correct. We need to consider the factor of population, like the GDP per capita. The book also talks about the green GDP, which is basically the true quality of economic growth by subtracting the total cost of environmental damage. For example, when we calculate the economic growth of any country, we need to subtract the social or environmental costs incurred by any industry to the society, for example, pollution. There are some other real examples in the book regarding the social and environmental costs. Charles Wheelan then addresses the role of demographics in the developmental activities and economic growth of any country. For example, the ratio of the young population to the old age population of any country or vice versa. This gives us a sense of rapid economic growth of developing nations like China, India and Bangladesh that have many young populations compared to their old age population. He does not miss out on the concept of total national happiness. It is a key concept to measure the mental and physical state of the citizens in any country. Similarly, the currency exchange rate of different currencies is affected by their internal inflation, economic growth, and peculiar resources. This has been clearly written in the book. In the final chapters of Naked Economics, the writer gives some intuitions on the role of Federal Reserve in managing the US economy or the world economy. He points out how the central banks of individual countries play a role in controlling inflation and interest rate. For example, the Federal Reserve is the central bank of United States of America. Then he points out how the trade and globalization are helping the growth of every country in the world. But on contrary, it even touches the fact that globalization is helping in a way, but is also acting as a constraint for poor economies to uplift. We can understand the reasons why the Western countries are quite ahead while the African and South Asian countries are backward after reading this book. All these things that I mentioned till now have been described in the book, which is easier to understand. So, what I think is that the book tried to touch every aspect of the rational economics. The other part is irrational economics. It is basically related to psychology, which I will be talking in some other videos on books on behavioral economics. So, if you want to know basic about economics, just lying on your bed with a Kindle or a book with you, you don't need any computers or calculators. It is worth reading, and I strongly recommend every economic enthusiast to read this book. Thank you everyone. Have a good time.